For more on today's indictments, Anthony Salvia is with us. He's a former State Department official who served as special advisor to the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs under Ronald Reagan. Anthony, this indictment surprised you today?
Well, look, it's been a long investigation. It's been on for some time now, and a lot of resources have gone into this. I mean, we're expecting something at some point, and finally they came up with this. I think the big story here is no Americans involved, no Americans indicted.
Well, there was one American who pled guilty to a tangential portion of this,
right?
I believe.
But in Rosenstein's announcement today,
right.
He was focusing on the 13 Russians, and it's an important development in the history of this whole investigation. On the other hand, it's not a big bombshell.
Yeah, it's interesting because you could look at it and you could say, is that it?
Yeah.
And that some Russians were indicted. They're never going to come to trial. They're living in St. Petersburg, and that's the end. Or there's some saying, he's got to have something more if he did this.
Well, we'll see. I mean, maybe there's more coming along. If this is all there is, it's kind of a disappointment. I mean, look, if the charge here was collusion, that somehow Trump was colluding with the Russians, and that hasn't been established yet. People are expecting that there's evidence that Vladimir Putin was on the phone telling Trump how to win in Pennsylvania or something.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to come across that kind of thing. The idea of guys sitting around in St. Petersburg doing cyber things, email blogs, and sort of putting out anti-Hillary stuff. I mean, it's okay, but it didn't swing Wisconsin.
And they said that there's no evidence that it affected the election.
Right. So, all I can say is if this is all they come up with, at least they can say that they established that, yes, the Russians were involved in a nefarious attempt to influence the election. So at a minimum, they've got that out of it.
Well, the Trump administration is hanging their hats right now on the word unwittingly, that some Trump associates may have unwittingly spoken to.
Right.
It's not quite the same as unindicted co-conspirators, right?
Right, unwittingly. In other words, not knowing that these people who were passing themselves off as Americans were in fact not Americans.
Not Americans.
And so, but if in fact they felt that these people were Americans, then it doesn't really establish that they knowingly and wittingly were colluding with.
I'm actually wondering, let's go to the extreme of what the Russians did illegally here. I mean, you can create false profiles on social media. I mean, there's no clear evidence that was wrong. I mean,
right.
Half the country would be in jail.
Right. No, that's exactly correct. And these people will not be extradited here, as you say.
So that raises the question, though, why would Mueller do this indictment other than to say, I had to get something? Unless he said, I'm doing this, that's a foundation for something next. It was Rod Rosenstein, basically the acting attorney general in this case, who gave the press conference, gave it some gravitas.
No, that's true, and that's right. That's the whole $1 million question. I mean, is this a prelude to some bigger thing coming along, or is this it? I have no way of knowing. I just think if this is it, then this is pretty small potatoes. Gives them some degree of political cover. They established nefarious activity, which is what they said was going on. Okay, but not the big collusion story. That's what we're looking for. What I think is also sort of part of this whole thing is they've also established they've reinforced the idea Russia bad. There's this whole effort to demonize Russia, which has been going on for some time. Both parties are involved in it. It's a bipartisan issue. They're both doing that, that will have consequences. That's part. The world is in a difficult situation in terms of international politics where they are right now. And the question is heightened U.S.-Russia tension something that really helps? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
But the Justice Department in this case is just looking at the legal aspect. Should not be looking at the political aspect.
Right. That's as far as DOJ is concerned. That's true. But there's a whole culture, political context in which this is
What we have about a minute left or so, but some Trump associates have quote flipped. Michael Flynn, Manafort. What, if anything, would we expect to come from that right now? And would they have been involved in talking to the grand jury about these 13 Russians?
I think it would have had to do with Manafort's own business, his connections, his contacts there in Russia, what he knew of perhaps other prominent people in the U.S., Republicans that are Trump people who might have had similar kinds of contacts. I think that's probably more what his thing is all about.
What should we be looking for because all of this is being leaked, right? We really don't know what's going on necessarily other than the public indictments. What should the public be looking for as a roadmap as to where this goes, do you think?
I think that you've got you got to wait for the next shoe to drop and all this thing. What Mueller comes up with next, if anything, you've got to look at what the Republicans are doing in terms of their efforts to turn this to deflect this from being Russiagate into FBI Gate, right? And they have cards to play.
They do. Yeah.
No, I mean this is paralyzing Washington. You know, this is having consequences internally, domestically, and it's having consequences for the foreign policy, and it's a real. I've not seen anything like this.
If the Russians wanted to cause chaos, and they've done it, they've probably far exceeded their expectations.
Right.
Anthony,
Right.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
good
you.
weekend.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming.
Yeah.